So what's unconscious bias? What are we even talking about, right? Because a lot of us maybe don't have that psych background, maybe where you dive into things like this. Some of us come from more of an ed background or other areas. So to get everyone on the same playing field, make sure that we all kind of are working on the same operational definition, we're going to talk about what's unconscious bias and what it is not. So here's an example, kind of an overarching definition, if you will. So implicit bias and unconscious bias, they're used interchangeably very often. So we're going to use them kind of interchangeably today and describe what that means. And they're often, unconscious bias usually describes attitudes and stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions like behaviors, and decisions in an automatic and unintentional way. And these really refer to our biases that operate outside of our conscious awareness. We're not necessarily aware of some of our attitudes and stereotypes. And there's no finger pointing today. There's no like, you shouldn't have this bias or you should have that bias, and your bias is right or your bias is wrong. It's just being human, right? Being human means that we have unconscious biases. We were raised in certain cultures. People have experiences and backgrounds that you choose or not choose. And obviously, the more reinforced you become in your attitudes and behaviors, you're more likely to continue those attitudes and behaviors, right? Basic behavior analysis. So your unconscious bias continues to get reinforced, like it or not. Welcome to being a human being. So, what I don't have up on the slide, but I do want to briefly just make sure that we have a kind of differentiation, if you will. What is the opposite of unconscious bias, which is our personal or explicit bias? And these are things that you can kind of say like, yeah, I know I think this, right? Like, I know that, I want to call it like a sports team, and I'm not like a super like football fan or something. Like I know that the Steelers are better than the Jets. Like, you know that, right? That's like your personal bias, and you probably stand up tall and proud on some of your personal and explicit biases, right? And the color purple is better than blue, right? Some of these things are just very apparent, right? Like coffee's better than tea. That's my explicit bias, and I would definitely stand a ground and get in an argument with someone about this, right? And a lot of these things are more nuanced, right? They're things that make you proud, and I like the chat going. You guys could probably start a whole this or that, or would you rather kind of game on personal biases, right? These explicit things that we're proud of our beliefs and our attitudes, and even sometimes just our preferences. And even if you're not proud, you're very aware of them, right? They're personal experiences that you've been shaped by, maybe their cultural upbringings, or things like maybe I celebrate Christmas and you celebrate Hanukkah. That's just, that's your celebration during that time. And that is your cultural and religious upbringing, something you value. It's your experience. And I take that day off from work. Right. So it doesn't mean that you're doing anything unconsciously. It's just kind of your shaped values and explicit biases, things that you are very consciously making decisions around. Okay. So you guys can be loud and proud and acknowledge all your explicit biases. They're much easier to work around, acknowledge, and use decision making. But what we're really going to dive into today is our unconscious bias. How do we actually become aware of these things? What is shaping them? How can we control that or take some control and acknowledgement of? So some things are, the news you follow, cultural messaging, social media, societal patterns or cultural neighborhood patterns that you exist in. And the key kind of takeaway for unconscious bias is, I don't even realize I'm thinking this. These are not things that you are consciously taking data on, right? They're not consciously, oh yeah, I definitely bought that coffee mug because I love coffee. They're just your general patterns of behavior based on your kind of unconscious bias. So in order to dive deep into unconscious bias and start recognizing them, we kind of have to start calling them something, right? We have to name them, operationally define them, if you will. So I like to tie and act a bit here and really talk about values. So what are values and how can we use them in behavioral terms? So values are verbally constructed reinforcers, if you will. They guide long-term patterns of behavior. They're not goals. You don't get to finish a value. You don't get to say, yay, I reached 100% of that, taking initiative value that I really have. They're just kind of motivating operations, right? They're ways for you to move toward different behaviors and actions. They help you guide decision-making because you're obviously going to be drawn toward making a decision towards your value versus away from your value. And they're also sources of reinforcement. They create patterns of behavior. There's not a, concrete number of values that exist in our world. They also can be a little bit more concrete, like things that maybe if we're working with neurodivergent or younger learners or people with IDD that need kind of that more concrete value, maybe something abstract like, ooh, I find religion, is valuable to me. I make a lot of decisions, steeped in religion versus like church or synagogue or temple, right? That's very concrete and they can value church the same as somebody values religion. It doesn't change. It's just kind of redefining what that is and making sure someone understands their values the way they identify them. So there's just some examples up here, and I've got more on another slide, but things like ensuring growth or being open-minded or having fun, having a healthy work-life balance. What does that mean nowadays, right? As Matt's calling out like 3 jobs that he works at the same time, and then giving back to the community at the same time, right? So there's so much movement and individualization with identifying what your values are. So also thinking about them because we like context and data and behavioral terms, right? An example might be, I value independence. So the behavior I engage in more often is showering. I can do that independently. Maybe I'm working with a teen or young adult. I actually have a 7-year-old that's working on increasing her independence and thoroughness of showering. And the reinforcement is, right, it feels right. Like, yeah, this is meaningful to me. It's very aligned. And it actually results in an increase in doing that behavior, right? An increase in showering, an increase in practicing driving because I want to be a driver to gain more independence, right? Earning those pivotal skills or those behavioral cusps that exist to access more of those behaviors. So, there's so many things here that you guys can do, right? Maybe the value is creating a healthy work-life balance. So your behavior is, I don't check emails after 5 p.m. Done, 5 p.m. cut off. I've created a boundary. So my behavior is, that's not passing the dead man's test, I guess, huh? I turn off notifications at 5 p.m. for work. And then the reinforcement is, I get more time with my family. This feels good. It feels meaningful. It feels more aligned. And you're going to move toward and continue that behavior. So again, we're kind of creating those, that motivating operation surrounded by the values. So why do values matter? And when we're talking about unconscious bias, like where are we going with this, right? So like I kind of alluded to, behavior is more likely to continue and increase when it's reinforced externally, right? When there's praise coming, when I get more access to tangibles, or when I get a break, right? I get to escape something. And at the same time, it's internally aligned with values, right? It makes you feel good, if you will. It makes you smile. It makes you breathe. It makes you have less anxiety symptoms. It doesn't make your heart race, right? There's things that you can kind of measurably identify that continues to reinforce these behaviors moving towards your values. And when behavior aligns with your value, your natural reinforcement continues to increase. You start to gain access to more things that are valuable to you, be it people, time, reading, whatever that, those things are. But When the behavior conflicts with your own values, and I'm going to give some examples of how working with families and as a clinician, maybe others' values, but when your behavior conflicts with your values, like, oh man, I'm always the one that stays late till 6 o'clock, even though we close at 5, right? And then when you get home, it's conflicting because now you don't have as much time with your family, or you're rushing, or you don't get that extra hour at bedtime to read, or whatever those things are. You start feeling more rigid, avoidant of things. Your burnout behaviors increase. You start feeling resent toward either your job or coworkers or whatever that looks like, right? So maybe they're avoiding you. There's a catalyst of, punishing behaviors and consequences, if you will. So framing this also in a clinician perspective, when you're working with families, I often see this with teens, right? I'm sure everyone was a teenager at some point that had conflicts with your family, your parents, right? When your values don't align with your parents. So when you start to become a teenager, you start identifying your own values. What is valuable to you? Maybe getting a job and working, or, friends. Friends are really valuable, and I'm going to make really poor behavior choices just so I can access friends, right? And meanwhile, your parents maybe have different values for you or for your family, where maybe integrity and respect and, family time are really valuable to them, and you're avoiding family time at all costs, right? No, friends are the most important as a teenager, and I don't care about my grades, and I don't care about this. So when your values conflict, again, you have more punishing behaviors surrounding the whole family unit. So then trying to identify what's a good behavior contract here, or what are good goals, what are socially valid, what are valuable goals? Well, are you working on valuable goals now for the team, for the family, for yourself? What's coming into play? So we're going to break that down as we move through. So these are just some examples. There's kind of all different ways that you can identify values, not only for yourself, but learners that you're working with. The one off to the side that's kind of columns with little circles, you can kind of grade them. These are more school age appropriate, little kid appropriate, right? Like, I want to be popular or famous. I like having fun. I want to be good at sports, right? And they can kind of rank them. The one in the middle is more of an acceptance commitment therapy value worksheet, kind of sorting your core values and identifying what's important, what's not important. There's, ones that are just kind of more like badge style and icons. The one on the bottom, it can be more neutral. You can spread them out. You can do forced choice preference assessments. You can have conversations. You can make it active, kind of depending on who you're working with, be it yourself, colleagues. This is a great group activity if you're working on a team, to see where your overlap in values are, maybe sharing work values, right? What's your company values, starting there, what's the most important? You'll see that the ranking is different across different individuals. Everyone doesn't rank values the same. And then identifying behavior, right? Like, what are some behavior changes and what unconscious biases jump in there? If someone values teamwork more than someone else, watch what their behavior is. What's their go-to, right? Are they the first to jump in to support a teammate, or say, oh, don't worry, you can go home sick, I got you, versus someone else saying, oh, can you stick it out one more hour? I really want to finish my lunch, right? Recognizing what behavior crops up, right? What actions take place when you actually identify the values and see what's moving toward and what's moving away toward those values.